Hello, welcome to Conversations for the Moving Self. I am your host, Megan, a lifelong movement artist and facilitator. Each week, I invite you inside of the honest conversations that I have been having with some incredibly inspiring movement and well-being practitioners, as we unpack the beautiful roller coaster it is to pursue a lifestyle built around movement and well-being. Join us as we share and reflect on the moments where movement lights your soul on fire to the situations where you begin to question everything. Today, I'm welcoming Ella. Ella is someone who I connected with briefly in London during my training, but again, in more depth last year. I had the privilege to work with them closely in assisting for the BA students at London Contemporary Dance School on an enrichment week, and seeing Ella in process and kind of just the way they cultivate the space and show up both themselves as well as holding space. I immediately, when starting this podcast, thought of Ella for having on as a guest. She is someone who just brings such a warm presence in all the ways I've interacted with her, and has a lot to offer from different lenses in the dance world and movement world, but also has an interdisciplinary career. And I'm super excited to just chat with Ella today a little bit about how the journey is going, where we're at right now, and all the things. So thanks for coming, Ella.
Thanks for having me.
Maybe we start today with our opener question of how you're showing up for your movement and well-being practice today.
Beautiful question. And it's interesting as well, because I normally have a very set thing that I do. I do two things in the morning. One is this process called recapitulation, where you kind of go over yesterday and just check in with yourself, like, was I in or out of integrity? And also, was there anything that kind of came up for me that maybe I want to like just go back and have a conversation, or, just kind of, so I normally would do that. And then I will do my Journal to Joy, which is a book that I was just telling you about, that I published and perfected 6 times until I was finally happy with the creation. But I had a nightmare about the way the world is going. And I woke up so early, and I was just like, I just need to sit with my tea, and I just need to ground in a different way. So how I will look after my well-being is, after this, I will do my journaling. And I've actually decided, I found a dance class to go to, which is like, generally what I do in terms of my own well-being is I train either at home. At the moment, I love someone called Vanya Moves, who's like a mobility kind of trainer, or I go to silks and I just train on the silks. But I've decided to go back to dance for me, because I realized that I'm kind of, just like in a bit of a journey of like, I've trained so hard my whole life, and like particularly, that kind of, since I finished my training, this like, I must not lose it, I've got to keep this dancer body, I've got to, like, really pushing myself. And last year I sort of stopped and just went, I don't want to. I don't want to push myself this hard anymore. And then I've been sort of in this journey of like, well, what is dance for me? And can I go back into kind of like beginner's mind and just start to enjoy it again? So I'm actually going to go to Denzel Bailey's ballet class in London.
Oh, lovely. Yeah, no, it's so, like, I think it's such a prominent theme sometimes, like when the career starts to get busy and it came from this place of passion, but then there's all these other exterior pressures and
Right.
just life gets in the way sometimes.
Yeah.
But to be able to like step back, and I think you also brought up something really nice of like just being able to listen to where you're at, even with the simplicity of waking up and going, no, actually, to show up for my well-being today, I need to change my routine rather than keeping these really strict boundaries. And how to listen to the circumstances you're in to be able to support yourself authentically.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I hope the class goes well, and
Thank you.
it's
I will let you know.
everything we dream of.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Like, do I remember, and I have like I've been really loving this kind of mobility training for my body. Like it's just working on like hip strength and knee strength and, very kind of functional, but I can really feel the, like the power. It feels like a grounded power. Um, but will I remember? Like,
Yeah.
how will my
Yeah.
ballet be for a long time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
It's
also, I
interesting
think it's such an
actually.
interesting thing. Yeah, when you like grow up training super intensely, and if you entered a movement space like from quite a young age, and then it just becomes this constant in life, and then this thing of returning to the basics and what maybe shows up like physically as well with what you're saying of like, okay, I've done all this mobility training now, and how can I make it still applicable, but then also get into the ballet class and just dance
Yeah.
because we love it, and
And
not
even like
have to take it
ballet
so
for me,
seriously.
yeah. So ballet for me became like a very serious thing. It was like in the training, that kind of awareness of I didn't have like your typical ballet body, all of this stuff, all of that conditioning. Um, but I had a memory this year that it was actually the thing that inspired me. I saw it on TV. I must have been like 4 or 5 and went to my mum, that's what I'm going to be when I grow up. And she took me to a ballet class, and but I was really disappointed because it was like good toes and naughty toes and skipping around the room. And I was like, that's got nothing to do with what I saw on the TV. And I realized that my mum, bless her, like she did what she felt was best, but she was like, oh, phew, I'll take you out of that class because um, I grew up in the 80s. Like it was we were kind of in this wonderful kind of feminist times. And she was just like, oh, thank goodness I can put you into something else. And I got into football instead and kind of did other things. But I had this memory of like, oh, I'd quite like to go back and just like, go back to that 5-year-old self who was like, I love ballet, because I have had glimpses of it where it's just so delicious when you're kind of twisting your spine and you're feeling it. I do love Denzel Bailey. I think his classes are really great. So
Great.
yeah, I'll let you know how it goes, and if it is like a beautiful space to be in, not a kind of I don't know, I feel like I've spent a lot of time in ballet going, oh, I'm not good enough, I don't belong, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, so lovely. Yeah, interesting. I was actually going to ask you a little bit more about like your journey movement wise.
Mm.
I knew you had a history in like salsa practices and also have been building a silks practice. Um, but also just mentioned the football practice growing up. Like, what was your journey into? Yeah, I'll start there and
Yeah.
then.
Awesome. So it's quite long. I'll try and like compress it. Um, but yeah, as a child, so after that ballet experience, I didn't dance until I actually started drawing dancers age 17. That's not true. I found salsa age 14. So I went to a party, like, like a parents were at a party, and there was Latin music and there was dancing. And that felt like home, actually. Like there was, and I even eventually I kind of got invited to teach salsa in my school. So salsa was there, but I do feel like I kind of rejected dance apart from salsa because salsa felt like home. And until I was 17, there was just this sort of and I think it maybe was connected with some sort of conditioning around kind of what it meant to be a dancer, and what I'd kind of learned in the world. But yeah, age 17, I realized I was actually drawing dancers, and I was drawing myself as a dancer. And then eventually I went, oh, I want to be a professional dancer. And it was really, like kind of soul destroying to admit at first, because I'd never done it. I already believed like you have to have danced since you were a child, like, 5 and onwards, and that makes you a dancer. So I didn't do anything about it. I went to study politics and sociology, which again, um, I think there was a conditioning there because I had been told from very young. My mum was the first in her family to go to uni. So it was very like, you will go to uni. So I didn't ever question these things. I just kind of did it. Um, but at uni, I started to get paid to do salsa work and then samba work. And then I actually started, like, it's, still amazes me. I started getting flown around the world to do salsa and samba shows. And it was just like this amazing experience, where I began to realize you don't have to do a 9 to 5 job, because I'd never really connected. I was doing my politics and sociology essays by night with loads of coffee. It wasn't a joy. My love with salsa, and I would go out to salsa clubs, and I'd even go to salsa clubs, come home, write the essays, submit them in the morning. Like, yeah, that was life. um and then after
Yeah.
uni, I I auditioned. So a friend of mine, and again, I had all these kind of beautiful synchronicities of meeting people. But I met someone who said, "Why don't you audition for a contemporary company?" Which I did in Leeds. Merville Jones, who's one of the founders of Phoenix, was the director, and Emma, can't remember her surname, but I auditioned and I got in as an apprentice. So I kind of had this like exposure to contemporary in quite a weird way. And actually, I managed to, like, at my uni, I managed to take a few electives. Like, I took an elective at Bretton Hall. Like, I did a few things to sort of study dance, but it was all very, bits and pieces. And then I studied as an apprentice. And after that, I admitted to myself that there was some, like, dance was a hole in my life and I needed to pursue it. So I actually, yeah, my kind of way into professional training, and like, all of that time I was actually working as a dancer, but I felt this kind of resentment, or I was aware that there was becoming this resentment of, I wanted to be a professional, and people would say, "Where did you train?" I was like, "Oh, I didn't train," and all of those things. So yeah, I did about 2 years of saving up, like working 3 jobs. One was in Birmingham, two were in Leeds, like, just kind of really going in to save the money to go to Laban, because I was a mature dancer at this point. I was 25. When I was in Birmingham, I also discovered breaking. And I think there was something for me in, like, I'd gone very heavily into salsa and samba, where you're like very much sexualized and kind of put into this like feminine box. And I felt there was something for me in breaking where I could like fight my way out of the boxes that I was dealing with in society. So I took up breaking as well. And then eventually I saved almost enough to go to Laban. I had to work. So I did Laban part-time over 2 years, and I had to work a lot during the program. And I think by the end of the first year, I recognized I was burned out. So I took a job dancing in Turkey. It's amazing. Um, and then I got into the place, and that's how I ended up at the place. I did an MA at the place. So it was all this, like, you know, lots of difficulty, but also these amazing experiences, and kind of like, wow, this happens. And then, oh yeah, I'd also been I'd got onto this project in Brazil, which was a samba project, but that's where I found circus. So I ended up being in a kind of circus, like acro circus performance. So that was where the love of circus came from. And I worked a job in Leeds for the Leeds Children's Circus, and all of these kind of funny little things that guided me into my life. And then I had a really
Yeah.
cool career as a performer. Yeah, probably a highlight was the Olympics opening ceremony. There's been many others, but that was probably like just a great moment. And eventually I decided to choreograph. But I think even on that journey, there's also been yoga, and now more recently rolfing. I'm studying as a body worker, and this kind of fascination with the body and trying to understand. Like, I really believe that we hold emotions in the body, and that there's so much power in movement and shaking and shifting things out and letting go of kind of the meaning that we hold in the body. So yeah, that's tried to compress it all into a little,
Yeah.
little story.
No, it was great. It's super interesting because I think, like, yeah, there's all these little nuances of your journey that I also didn't even know about. But at the same time, I think it's like, of course, because you're so right. Like, one experience and leads to the next movement practice and leads to the
Mm,
next movement practice, and they're all feeding back to like our instrument of the body.
mm,
Like, I think it's super interesting also just to hear a little bit more about your journey, and it's so valuable, I think, like highlighting these little ways that the things appear and how you were saying on each job, like a new movement practice kind of appeared or came closer to you and you were exposed to it. And what I've been reflecting on a lot recently is I started dance from quite a young age and then kind of never really strayed from it until I was actually in training and then was like, oh, wait, like doing other movement practices actually can strengthen
Mm,
dance and also my relationship with dance.
mm,
But even how you were saying like the body just holds so much and understanding, like I think I always understood like, yes, there's something about well-being there and it's important to take care of it. But like in the way of understanding, just the more you learn about your body through any different lens can allow the thing that you're passionate about to be even more nuanced and
mm.
uh, fed from a more knowledgeable space. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
So true.
lots of little thoughts coming up in my head.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I guess now, like, as you are facilitating a lot of spaces, maybe what it makes me think about is like with choreographing, but also with training as a bodywork practitioner. I don't know how much you're getting to work with uh, external people in that space yet, but when you are guiding spaces, how do you navigate like supporting the people you're working with and understanding this idea that like we can ebb and flow and are really like you have a lot to offer there and all these little
Mm,
gems about movement practices and being able to remind someone that the journey can change along the way.
yeah. Yeah, really good question. And I think randomly what's come to me, maybe this will kind of if I wiggle with the journey and maybe I'll come to answer it. But um I'm really fascinated with the nervous system. I think like I've just been working on an amazing project in the north of England in Bradford, uh, for Bradford 2025. And it was actors and dancers, singers, circus artists, and actually a community ensemble as well. But I think this kind of thread of recognizing that nervous systems we kind of go in and out of like presence. Sometimes we are just here in the space and sometimes we're in fight or flight or freeze, and supporting people to be okay with that. And I wouldn't say I've solved it at
Mm,
all. It's a journey to recognize that kind of that can affect so much within a space. And our internal dialogue, be that like, oh, I'm not good enough, or maybe like I've been journeying this whole kind of, well, if actually I'm not dancing for me anymore, am I still a dancer question? All of these kind of things people might bring into a space, and how to not resolve it, allow it to exist in the space, and also not define it. Because I think the more that we kind of like go into definitions of these things, the more that becomes the reality that we experience. And it, like, again, this thing in Rolfing they talk about meaning in the body. So maybe it's like I'm a shy person, and then the person starts to kind of hunch over, or like maybe they're tall and naturally tall, so they actually are used to stooping, and so they kind of do something with their posture. And I think like even within the body, once we start to believe these stories about ourselves, it kind of affects how we move. And so that's something I'm really interested in, is like, how can you create a space where you open the person up to possibility, perhaps without like telling them what to do, or like giving the
mm,
person space for their own journey. But yeah, almost like being able to hold space for that, and recognize, like, a lot of the time on this last project, it was just so fascinating to be able to go, that's nervous systems are activated in the space, so actually, can we take a breath? Or I don't know, can we can we play a game that just changes up the energy so that we kind of get out of that kind of nervous energy that's up here and drop back down and ground into the body and so on. And even for me, to be able to go, oh, I'm activated right now. So what do I actually need? Oh, I'm desperate for a wee, but I'm in I'm like trying to get the show finished. So I've forgotten and it's just, I think it's really interesting to really start to listen to the wisdom within the wisdom of the body.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Listen to the wisdom within. That is such a nice sentence. uh, yeah. And so, something about like, yeah, I was talking recently, like as I'm entering a new space and teaching a lot of new students, I
Mm.
was talking with a close mentor about like, you know, sometimes overcomplicating the content you want to teach or like what you want to share. And I was having this conversation with them about returning to the why and uh, just even what we were talking about at the beginning of the conversation of like what is dance for me and how can I return to the joy of it
Yeah,
and then share from that space. But
beautiful.
equally then they were reminding me like there is so much you already know and like if you can calm the nervous system then you can offer from a more uh, from a space of integrity but also in like a not acting out of reacting but just showing up one step at a time and being able to listen. But if the
Yeah.
nervous system is too activated, then sometimes we're not even like seeing clearly or yeah.
Mm. Yeah, really interesting. It must be really fascinating because it's the first year, right? So yeah, it must be quite amazing to be at that kind of beginning of something and like that opportunity to really positively influence as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
I also wondered, like we connected through a university space. And
Mm.
when you, especially like the enrichment week that we did earlier in the year, I wondered when you're entering a space and only having like a short week to work with university level students, I felt that you brought a really strong prioritization of well-being versus like taking risks and allowing the movers in the space to explore new parts of themselves. And at least from my experience and hearing them chat afterwards, like they all felt very held, and it felt like a really safe space to explore the depths of what we can do physically. What are some tools that you've noticed along the way, like in short time spans, to be able to break down those nervous system walls and equally make them feel held?
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually think probably the biggest one that I'm thinking about this last project because it's what I've just been on, and
Yeah.
like, some of the aerialists are actually really, really new aerialists. Like they've come from dance, they've trained like for a year, and then they were just doing an aerial show. So I think that was a really good space to kind of see that. Um, I actually think a big part of it comes from holding that person whole, rather than becoming like the sort of teacher student relationship, kind of giving them the tools and making up, like, I really believe in there's the technique, there's the training of the technique, but then when it comes to the creativity, there's the space. So for example, one performer had this beautiful hoop solo called The Dance of Resistance. And, I helped her create sections of it. She also worked with another amazing aerialist called Deborah Sanderson. Um, and but there was also a lot of space. And then I might come in and say, actually, I would suggest that you run round at this point, or, you do this thing to kind of for the dramaturgy and the arc of the piece. But the movement came from her. And I think there's a lot in kind of going, I have faith in you. And also, like, if it is in a short space of time, it's better that the movement comes from within than kind of, oh, I have to do shape, 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 because it's not natural. It's a learned thing that I
Mm,
feel like, for me anyway, it takes me time to feel inside of it, to get inside of it, to kind of wear that movement. Whereas if I've made it, number one,
yeah.
like the whole sensory experience of the creating, so I remember it, but also it comes from a really authentic place. It's not coming from doing as we were told, that kind of like, again,
Mm.
student teacher kind of relationship. So that for me feels like a really important piece. And I really also think, people are amazing. Like when you let people create, even like the community ensemble on this project, like the stuff they were creating, it's I think we often do this thing of putting people in boxes and limiting them. And then when you actually set them free to be themselves, that's when the magic happens.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes me think even just of like the same topic that we were talking about at the very beginning of our conversation today, of like the different movement practices and experiences, and whether that's in life or in class or whatever, but like that can feed the creativity that maybe if you put someone in too much of a box, it limits what they can offer as well. I
Yeah.
recently was volunteering at a retreat center, and one of the yoga facilitators' sons was there, and I was playing football with him. And I never grew up playing football, and I was saying afterwards I was having the most fun, and I was just like so excited. And I think because I had been in a yoga class right before it, and then like was working on some dance projects later on in the day, like I was in a creative space in the afternoon thinking about the way that me just kicking around this football with this 8-year-old was informing like the way I was moving. And it's so, yeah, like these, I think if I was in a class maybe and the facilitator had given a very set task, then maybe I would have even put a lens on myself of what I perceived the
Mhm.
task to be, and would have limited what's coming up naturally,
Yeah.
versus I was just like in an improvisational space. But
Yeah.
yeah, this is really juicy stuff.
And I think
Interesting.
improvisational spaces are just such, like creative, like the creativity for me, like that's where I want to be. I'm really excited. I'm going up next month. I'm going to Leeds to this like somatic kind of, it's rolfers and dancers all in a space. And I'm just excited to play, to really be able to kind of explore this body. Like I found a lot in my training, they would say, well, you need to decide on one style. But in improvisation, we don't, we're not like, oh, this is ballet now, we're just being. And I think that for me is like the thing that I most love to see on stage. It's not like, oh, this person's leg went so high. It's more like they're in their beingness, and they're in that flow state.
Yeah. 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 It sounds like such an exciting event. I'm excited to hear more about it. And also, as you were speaking about that, like with in training, how a lot of times this narrative comes up of like you have to kind of find a specialization or know exactly what path you're heading down. It made me think about your writing side of your career
Mhm.
and your yeah. I recently was just like having a think about how it's even in my own freelance career at the moment, I feel like writing is really feeding me from a space that I kind of come to, and then I dip away from it and come back to it and dip away from it. And those little like societal things of like, oh, but if you start writing, then are you not a dancer anymore? Or are you this and instead? And it just made me think about, yeah, I feel like you have a really nice way of sharing the different sides of your practice as well. And yeah, I wondered how that's feeling right now as you're like getting into this publishing phase. um,
Yeah.
I know you have just finished the edits. How is it feeling in terms of like, yeah, what is maybe like the writing versus the moving side of things offering to you at the moment?
Sure. It's also really interesting because I can't remember if I shared it on one of those kind of enrichment weeks, that when I was studying at the place, the director at the time, actually it wasn't the director, it was kind of a head of year, said to me, that I should consider a career as a dance journalist, not a dancer, because my technique wasn't up there. And then I had this wonderful moment when she came to see. First, I was in Russell Malafont Company, and she came to see that show, and it was like, oh, hello. And then she came to my own show at Sadler's Wells, and I was like, welcome to my show. You told me I couldn't get here, and here I am. So I was kind of reflecting on that moment yesterday. Right. But it's interesting that then, like, I'm definitely having this calling to write at the moment. Like, I went to this amazing thing in London where I ended up just having loads of kind of download, like intuitive downloads. And I've actually got like 7 books. That's why I finished publishing. It's just over there. I finished publishing this book so I can kind of complete on that and then start writing these 7 books because they need to be written. So I'm really loving it. I think the 2 things that I notice is, one, I struggle to sit still. Like I am definitely kind of, I have ADHD. Like there's a reason that I got into dance, and I also have like a very small scoliosis. But if I sit still, things kind of just feel really uncomfortable in my body. So there's something in like how I set up my day, that movement has to be a part of it. I can't just, like if I spend a whole day writing, I won't be happy. First of all, my body won't be happy, so that's really important. And I also think, like, I do feel that the movement informs the writing. So like one of the things I'm exploring at the moment is kind of, I have loads of injuries just on my right side of my body. And that's kind of what took me to rolfing and so on in the first place, was exploring that. But it's kind of like guided me to writing about some of these things and exploring some of these movement things. Like a way to write and explore the experience of the body and the beingness. And and again, like, as I write, it's like I'm right-handed, so I'm using my right hand, so I'm kind of again feeling more of the tension. So yeah, it's fascinating and a gift.
Yeah.
The getting out, the
Yeah.
going in nature, the
Yeah.
movement is so important. Yeah.
Yeah, like how to return to the balance, but then also like the body craves it anyway. So it's just this listening thing again of like, how do we come back to what simple needs we maybe need for the day, but in a certain headspace maybe we're ignoring, or
Yeah.
yeah,
And actually, I don't know about
it's
you, but I feel like
so
that
lovely.
links into my training, because in my training, I think I learned to ignore the listening, to kind of override my body instead, because it was all external. It was, what do you look like? What do you look like in the mirror? Like getting feedback and being marked on grades. And I'm finding that if I'm in my body, it's a very different experience to that external one. And then the more that I listen, for example, I think we can often live by a to-do list, and then we're like, this is what I've got to do today, instead of like, actually, what does my body want? And when I move, and when I write from that place of like, I want to write versus like, I have to write a book, it's such a whole different experience. And I think the same in movement practice as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and this I guess it made me think about like the space, like at certain times in, I guess specifically in training, like maybe there's not a lot of space in the schedule that you're given, but then equally like freelance wise, sometimes maybe there is more space and other times less space, and how
Mm,
when we get
yeah,
given like a really defined structure, it's easy to like then just turn off all the signs inside our body that are craving for something. But
right.
then when there's I've had a few weeks of more space in my schedule and been able to listen, and it feels like such a gift. I'm like, oh my gosh, compared
Totally.
to the way I was operating the past, sorry, this past couple months, like the I just feel so much more free and able to show
Yeah.
up
And I
honestly
think,
and working with myself rather than against myself.
it kind of feels important there to like acknowledge, number one, like I had a nightmare last night about what's going on in the world. We're in these kind of times where it's very hard to have your nervous system balanced. And like, for example, in Showtime, right? If we have like Showtime, it's very often the place where the well-being kind of goes out of the window in terms of a dance creation. It's like suddenly it's like, actually you need to get the thing finished and you need to light it and you need to do the costumes, and there's all these things going on, and it's like, well, where's the time for that kind of integration and that well-being? So I think this is really interesting, and again, probably something I'm journeying of, like, how do what little moments, like I'm finding just breathing, that's like my easiest solution to be able to go, oh, I'm not grounded right now. I've kind of, like, again, in the body, right? My body goes up and everything gets here and my voice is like suddenly, and then to go, no, like, what do I need to just take a breath and ground? Or is it like, um I worked for about 7 years as a waitress, kind of alongside everything to fund it. And I figured out that if I smoked, I would get breaks. And there was a really cute post I posted the other day of someone who, on his break, he has a cigarette pack and inside it there's some bubbles and he just blows bubbles. It's like, but that, like, honoring that actually, isn't that just gorgeous? I was like, yeah, I like that, because we need those moments to breathe and to pause and to check in and go, oh, I didn't realize I've needed a wee for an hour, or whatever the thing that we're not listening to is.
Yeah. Yeah, this is so nice. I love that with the bubbles and just like a little,
Yeah.
almost like a little packet of self-care,
Right,
little
it's
moment to
disguised
breathe.
in a
Oh,
cigarette box. I
and
thought that. Yeah.
yeah, and it's like
Yeah.
still the physical act of like breathing, which I think, yeah, it's quite metaphorical. Very
Yeah.
cute. So sweet.
Yeah. And maybe just one
Ah,
more thing to say about that. Like, I think the rolfing kind of journey, because I would say I lived a lot of my life in kind of survival mode and running and, like, this kind of energy. So it's been so fascinating to, like, for my nervous system to relax. And of course, not all the time, but to just have these moments of like, this is what it feels like to be, like, fully in my body. And it wasn't always the case in dance. Sometimes I felt that flow in dance, and sometimes actually I was like fully in, like, in heightened kind of alert on stage, or yeah.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah. Super nice.
Mm.
Yeah, and like at the beginning, I think can be quite jarring actually to the system and like hard to listen. I was on the beach this weekend and was like, no, Megan, you can actually just lay here and you don't have to do anything and it's okay. Like, and it's allowed. And I think that's subtle like conditioning I've built up in London as well, like just being in a city and
Yeah,
the the what is like relaxing. Um,
that's so
but
cool.
yeah,
Do you feel like you dance better for, number one, the heat, but also the, like, that time off?
definitely with the heat. I think
Mm.
yes, I even was saying to the woman I'm working for that like even within a big transition and like life shift, the studio and the space was like the thing that I felt super grounded in. And like I would walk in and just my nervous system would relax. And I was like, oh, this is so nice. Where like maybe, yeah, I don't know if it's something, it's probably a lot of things, but like something about the environment, also something about the heat, and
Mm.
also just having like a space of familiarity. Um, because even though it's a new specific studio, like the concept of a studio is very familiar. So yeah, it's been really
Mm.
nice to like, I think, experience that the way the shift like culturally, geographically, look, everything is affecting like my nervous system and also, yeah, what it's allowing me to explore deeper. And yeah. Hmm.
Mm.
This is leading me
Yeah.
into good thoughts for me to continue to explore as well. um, well, I think that's a great place to pause for today. Thank you so much, Ella, for coming on, chatting, and I feel like there's so many little gems that I'll take away personally from the conversation. I hope you have a lovely class with Denzel tonight and a nice slow morning.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I will be taking my time now. And it was such a joy, and just best of luck with the podcast and with what you're creating. It's really phenomenal.
Thank you so much for listening to episode 4 of Conversations for the Moving Self with the incredible Ella Mesma. I'm so excited as we continue to go through these episodes. Stay tuned for the next guests. We will announce new guests on Tuesdays, and episodes will be launched on Saturdays. You can follow along on Instagram at Conversations for the Moving Self, or on TikTok at Convos for the Moving Self. Episodes will be launched on all major streaming platforms on Saturdays. Stay tuned, and biggest thanks for all the support. Please like, follow, comment, leave any questions or comments that you'd like to share, what you'd like to hear us chat about, or any thoughts or reflections you have. Sending so much love to my movers out there, and see you next time.